So join me in welcoming our speaker, Irmadene Hanson.
Thank you very much. I am so glad to be here. Conflict is what we're here to talk about today, and it is by far and above the most excruciating at times to live through and deal with. And as a director of nursing, actually, if in every industry there's out there, it is cited to be the #1 reason why people feel stress at their jobs is conflict in some way, shape, or form. So we're going to talk about that today, sort of take it apart, sort of laugh about it, and work with what I'm hoping you'll be able to take these things home and work with them and make life a little easier. Not only here, not only in your jobs as director of nursing, but as moms and sisters and daughters and just a person out in the community. So before we start though, as Lori said, thank you for the introduction, by the way, Lori. I was the director of nursing at Bethany and Alec for a number of years and was a corporate nurse. I was a nurse's aide, an LPN, an RN, like many of you out there. So all along the way, talk about learning conflict in different stages of your life, right? I saw a thing on Facebook the other day. It was something like, I stress about future stress, and then I stress about stressing about the future stress, and it's stressful. So it's easy to, and when you are not able to stay centered and calm, which we're going to talk about today, that's one of the things that makes conflict the worst. Well, did you know that 30 to 40% of most managers' time is spent dealing with conflict? I was shocked by those statistics. That's a lot of time. But then when you think about your day, it doesn't just mean from you to your subordinates. It could be from you to another department manager who sees a situation differently than you see it and they want a different way to do it. It could be between you and your boss, and it could be between you and a family member or a tenant or a resident. Before I go on, I have to say something I'm really excited about. It's nice to see some assisted living DONs here as well. So great, welcome to you. I was in long-term care many years in nursing home and then assisted living, and I was so happy. Even though I'm not in Mindana as a member anymore, I was so happy to get the news that Mindana was inviting assisted living clinical directors, DONs, in too. So good to see you all, everybody. The other thing is that a statistic shows that up to 65% of those staff that are not doing their job as well as they need to be doing it is not because of motivation, not because of attendance, not because they don't want to do, it's because of they're feeling conflict in their job. And when you talk about them fighting with each other, that's the same as you and another department manager fighting with each other. And that's no fun to come to work to every day. If I'm a nurse's aide or a nurse and I'm working on the floor and I don't get along with another nurse's aide and it's constant, I mean, I'm speaking to the choir when I tell you the things that they can argue about. I mean, it's because she was dating my husband's cousin and she left him and cheated on him and I'm not with my boyfriend anymore, but she is, and oh Lord, and that comes into it, and or they don't pick up, that shift doesn't clean up after themselves the way they're supposed to, and it's the age-old shift wars. We've all heard them. I mean, there's just, it goes on, and then at home, of course, kids, they just push those buttons every day, and your honey and parents and sisters and brothers. So, but we respond to conflict based on our values and experiences and our beliefs and our cultures, not necessarily on the facts. Is that surprising to anybody? No. So I can tell you that if you were brought up in a family that never fought, you're going to be freaked out the first time you see somebody argue. Or if you brought up in a family that argued a lot, very loud, maybe Italian. People think I'm Italian sometimes. I had one administrator saying that. Administrator, are you Italian? Because you're very vocal, dramatic. I said, no, that's Lori. She's Italian. Doesn't she look Italian? But I mean, if you grew up in a family that's like that and has conflict and that's okay with them, and then you meet somebody that doesn't, you're going to react differently. Not to mention if you were insulted growing up, you might be very defensive. So the one thing about conflict is that if you don't handle conflict, it doesn't go away. It almost never goes away. And sometimes it festers a lot and then can come out as a blow up, right? Anybody have that happen to them? And you find out that they've been thinking about this for a year and they never told you about it, and all of a sudden the seemingly quiet nurse's aide or the seemingly quiet child starts freaking out and just becomes belligerent and crazy, and you didn't know. So one of the things as a leader that you have to do is pay attention to those small signs that tell you that somebody's having conflict. Another thing with conflict is that it does mean that there's maybe a time for the relationship to change. How many of you had little kids at one time or another in your life? And when they got to the age where they weren't sweet little babies anymore, and they were toddlers, and they wanted to toddle off the stairway, what did you do? You kept getting them and taking them back, right? Because they wanted to do something you didn't want them to do. That's a time of their life when all of a sudden things are changing and your relationship with them is changing. Now also, how about teenager? Anybody live through teenagers? Lots of people live through teenagers. That's a terrible conflicting time with parents as teenagers, because it's a time when they start thinking of their own thoughts and what they want to do, and they differ from ours. And that's just, as long as you're living under my roof, this is what you're going to do. And so that signals a time that that relationship is changing. Signals a time. You could have a long-term employee who's worked 25 years for you, and all of a sudden something changes in their life, and it changes it in their life at work, and pretty soon you're having them who maybe never said a word to you or never bucked a system or anything, coming up and questioning, and there's a change in the relationship. I think I have 3 adult children now, and my twins are 24, both are married now, and between the years of 20 and 23, truly, they became themselves. They became adults, they became wives, and all of a sudden our relationship changed again. Now this has been the best change, because they're adults, and they're thinking on their own, and they're turned out to be wonderful young women, but it was a change. And so maybe they don't go to the same church I do, or maybe they don't think on this subject the same as I do, but it's a time for a change. So that's what happens. Resolving conflicts builds trust. Have you ever heard the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? So anybody had a relationship here where you fought? That was yeah. And I see nothing stoic. Nobody has ever fought with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their husband. So if you ever had a relationship with that you had a fight with, which of course we all have, and fights with our children, when you make it through that fight, you look back and you're like, oh, we made it through that. And what did that do? It builds trust between you and that person, and tells you, guess what? We can make it through rocky, hard times. We can make it through rough times, and we're better for it, and we're still together. You trust that nothing's going to change. And as a child, they trust. I remember telling some of the staff as a DO, and I would say to them, I know you don't like this change. I know you don't want it. It's clear to me you're bucking the change that I'm asking you to try, a staffing pattern or a new policy or something like that. You are clearly up against me on this. you need to trust me. You need to trust me that I would never do anything to make this department worse. Everything that I do is when I'm trying to make this department better. You have to trust me. I know it's not going to feel good right now, but when we get to the other side, you're going to see. And you know what? And if my way doesn't work, I'll tell you, I was the first person to tell you many times my thought about what I thought was going to be the best thing for the nursing department or for that area or that station or that unit, it didn't work out quite right. But I was willing to tweak it, and they have to learn to trust you that if it doesn't work out, that you're not just going to leave it bad. So getting through conflict builds trust. So positive impacts of conflict. Can anybody think of positive impacts of conflict? Off the top of their head.
Yeah, when you hear their views and their ideas, sometimes systems change because it opens another way to do things.
Good, very good. That's exactly it. A positive thing of conflict is that you get different people's views. The thing is that I have a certain personality type, and my thought is like this way. I'm going to tell you a story about, and those of you who know this gal, there's a few of you in the group that do and still work with her. I have her permission to tell this story. When I first became the director of nursing, I butted heads with a social worker. Her name is Jamie, and we butted heads severely to the point where I was in tears at a leadership meeting around the table with all the department managers. I had to leave because I was crying. I was so angry. She questioned me and my thoughts, and I was already stressed to the max. And all she wanted me to do was look at it. She's a social worker. That's like from Mars, man. Very different thinking than me. I'm a nurse. Things are pretty black and white, right? I think this is the right way, that's the wrong way. And she was always saying things like, well, what do you crazy things like, what do you think the residents would think? Just teasing. And I'd be like, we don't have time to talk to the residents. No. But she was always saying that. That was her job. But the fact is, around the leadership table, I had to have her. I learned more from her than any other department manager. And I told her that a number of times after we got through the first 2 years of my DON-ship, because I thought I would die for anger, for conflicting with her. But the point is she opened my eyes up in ways that I would never have thought of. And until we had a great boss who let us duke it out. She just said, figure it out. You're both women, strong women, who believe in what you believe in, and you're smart. You need to figure it out, think about what you're doing, and we did. We did figure it out, and we ended up working really well together. And as managers, she's the one who taught me the most about looking at other people's point of view. So perfect, that's exactly it. Anybody else have an idea what something positive that might come from conflict?
Helps you get to the real issue.
Yes, that's a really good one. The thing is that some people won't speak up, and then you have those that will. And they're grateful for the people that will speak up, because it would never come to light. And when it does come to light, then you might find out, and you almost, I would say 90, and nod your head if you agree with me, 99% of the time, what you thought they were thinking and what they were actually thinking was different. And what they thought you were thinking and what you were actually thinking or wanting was different. The truth is that, this is my favorite saying, if it sounds like something that I wouldn't do because it's insane, I probably didn't do it. I probably didn't think that way. I mean, does it sound like something I would do for this department, for this family, well, no. Okay, well then trust me a little bit. If you just heard that I said that, I mean, that's crazy. I would never say that. I would never do that. Never, unless I got into the narcotic box or something. I don't know. But I would never say that. But it does get to the bottom of differences, and sometimes it gets to the bottom of the real problem. Yep. Anybody else? Positive impacts of one thing is it brings new ideas. Like there's a time that I hired a nurse from, the company that I worked for hired nurses from another country to come over. And I remember there was two of them at our facility, and there was a few things, I wasn't the DON at the time, but there was a few things that they did that were different. And it was different than what we did, and we didn't do it that way. But after we thought and learned from them, they were from the Philippines, it brought new ideas to what we were doing. So sometimes conflict brings new ideas. Okay? How about the negative impacts of conflict? I know, you think you know, but if you actually have to list them, it's hard. The number one that I can think of right off the top of my head, the number one thing is, oh my gosh, it's a time waster. Oh my Lord, you spend so much time trying to figure out what the problem was, trying to figure out who said what to whom. Like you're the investigator, the private investigator, you're the attorney, you're the opposing partner's attorney, you're the judge and jury. I mean, it spends a lot of time. You know, we said 30 to 40% of people's time. Would you say that that's a big one? Is it wastes a lot of time? Yeah. How about if you don't have conflict, it discourages free thought. You know, when people have conflict and they don't want to take, it discourages free thought. It discourages people from giving their opinion, and they don't feel heard, right? You got to have, your staff has to feel heard. You have to know that that's something that you need to do and listen to them. It's a good time to get through everything and bring up all points of view so that sometimes everybody gets a piece and everybody gets to be heard and everybody gets some satisfaction. So there's lots of positives. Okay.
One negative thing that happens that we forget about is the impact on the residents. You know, you have two aides that are fighting, and now pretty soon they're not talking to each other while they're passing the meal trays or whatever it might be, and everybody feels the tension.
Yes.
And then there, you know, we know there are aides that probably are telling the resident all about their woes with that other employee, even though they're not supposed to.
For sure.
Probably are, especially when they're in their room doing bedtime cares or whatever it might be.
For sure.
So I think that it filters down to the people that, you know, are supposed to be caring for.
Mm-hmm. For sure. That's a big one. Even in your household, when you and your husband are fighting, the kids can feel it. Everybody's walking on eggshells. I'm just going to go up to my room. I think I'll go out tonight. And it affects the people surrounding you for sure. So conflict styles. We're going to do this in just a minute, figure out what your style is, your number one go-to style. But what I can tell you is there's 5 conflict styles. And each of those styles are something that we may all use all of them. I can say that if I'm in a room with somebody that I'm intimidated by, or maybe that I don't know very much about the subject we're arguing or trying to decide, I'm not going to probably act like the shark. But if I feel confident in what I'm talking about, I'm passionate about what I'm talking about, I'm probably going to be the shark. So just because we're going to do a little test after I explain what each of these are, but just know that we all might use all styles at different times for different reasons. So the first one is, I'm just trying to see, I had some handouts here. Okay. All right. I'm going to hand these out, or do you want to hand those out? So this is a nice little tool for you to think about. It explains the conflict management styles. And it talks about the first one being accommodating. Can you imagine what that one might be? It's a picture of a teddy bear. You might just be very like, okay, it's fine. It's accommodating. It's a lose-win. If you are doing the accommodating, it's a lose-win. You're not getting what you want out of the conflict or the discussion or the difference in opinion. The other person is getting their way. And just because they're getting their way doesn't mean that's bad. Sometimes we do that with our husbands because we know the next time we're going to win. It's like one of those that says, pick your battles. You know, sometimes I don't care if I lose a battle. Okay, I don't really feel strongly about that, so I'm going to let this go. So accommodating, as you can see on your, oh, do you have an extra one of those? Yeah. No, oh, that's okay. No, there's like 50 of them here. So the accommodating one you can see is when you cooperate to a high degree, and there's times when you might use this, like when the relationship is more important than the issue. You might want to use that, right? You're more worried that that relationship is going to get harmed than you, so then that would be a good time to use it. When there's desire for harmony and you don't want to fight, sometimes you might accommodate at the supper table, but late that night after the kids are in bed, you're ready to take it on. But you might accommodate at the supper table. Another one is how it can be losses. Let's say that you accommodate somebody and they get their way. Maybe it doesn't matter because the losses that you're going to feel because of that you can minimize. Can change that, you know. So you're like, okay, I'm okay with losing. The next one we're going to talk about is called the avoiding. It's the turtle, and that's a good symbol. It's just it's just not. I'm going to pretend this is not happening at all. I don't even. Anybody feel like sometimes they do that? When might you use that?
When you're exhausted.
When you're tired. Right. When you're tired. Anybody else ever use the avoiding?
When you want them to resolve themselves, like the two.
That's
kids
exactly
that
it.
Have the chair issue about somebody, you know, undo
Right.
it out.
That's exactly it. That's probably one of the best reasons to use the avoiding, is when you need to say to them, just like our boss said to me and the social worker, Jamie, she said, I'm not dealing with this. You guys deal with it. And we figured it out. That's a good time. You can use the avoiding when the relationship and the whole issue is not important. That's a good time to avoid. If you avoid forever, and it's something that's in your realm of responsibility, eventually you're going to have to deal with it, right? Eventually. But you may be able to avoid it for a while until you have more information. Maybe you just say, you know, I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to get more information. So then you avoid. And that's okay. I have a friend who was married 26 years, and on the day that their last child graduated from high school, his wife went out to the curb after the little party. They lived down in the metro area. Went out to the curb after they cleaned up the whole graduation party mess, and she went, I'm free! And the next morning, she packed her bags and left. Not kidding you. She packed her bags and left, and she got a boob job. And she got her thighs pulled up. Did you even know you could do that? Like you can, like the saggy skin on your, I mean, I'm over 50, so you know, there's some, you can pull them up. That's what he told us, yeah. So, yeah, and he said, you know what he said? He said, I don't get it. We never had one fight in 26 years. I'm like, really? Okay, maybe I'm a little Italian. I mean, I'm actually Norwegian, but I could never be in a 26-year relationship. Well, first of all, I haven't never been in a 26-year relationship, but I could never be in one and not have an argument. I mean, I said, do you think you ever just avoided things? Like, clearly she didn't think that everything was kosher. Can you imagine? Oh my Lord, we never fought once. Well, I think she avoided or just drank. I don't know. So I don't know. So that's a good situation of an avoiding. The next one on your list is called collaborating. And I'll be honest with you, I don't get this picture because collaborating is the one that we all strive for most of the time. That should be in the center, don't you think? It's weird. That's the best one. But sometimes collaborating, you don't have time to collaborate, right? So collaborating is the only one that's a win-win. You win and they win. That means you've come to a decision where everybody gets most of what they're looking for in that relationship now, or in that situation. Now, I can tell you, I wrote up many staff in all the years I was an RN, and many times my deal was that I would never make it so that they didn't know it was coming. And so when we collaborated, sometimes sitting down with that first write-up or even the conversation prior, sometimes it was to say to them, I'm going to collaborate with you. What is causing you to have these problems at work? Or what is and usually it was conflict with somebody else, or what is causing you to call in sick? And let's figure out what the problem is and let's fix it. And so even if it's a negative situation, sometimes that collaboration, you come together and you find some answers for that person and you help them. But collaborating, when might you not use collaboration? It takes time. Collaborating takes time. When somebody is falling on the floor and you have to start CPR, you can't be like, okay, well, who is going to start this? Somebody, are you okay with going and getting the crash cart? No, you get a crash cart, you get down on your knees, you start compressions, I'm going to do this, somebody call 911, get the thing, are they DNR, are they CPR? There's no time to be a collaborator at that time. Then you got to be the shark, right? So that's the collaborating. The next one on your list is competing. That's the shark. That's when you have a win-lose. That's a win-lose. You're going to win, they're going to lose, the end. Right? And that sometimes is what you have to do when there is no chance that they are ever going to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you might have to just say, this is the decision I'm making. Now, you can be a shark in your relationship outside of work, but that might not always work because you don't always have power, right? In your relationship with your spouse or even your kids. They say never get into an argument with the toddler. Never. You will always lose. So being the shark and competing, that's strong. All right? And then the last one is compromising. This is what they call the lose-lose. You compromise, they compromise. It's different than collaborating. Pretty much nobody's getting everything they want. And usually in the compromising, it's one of those that you do because it's a temporary fix. It's just temporary until we have time to collaborate, until we have time. Have you ever done that? Made a temporary decision? Say, okay, well in a month we'll relook at this. Yeah? Or with your kids, said, okay, this is my decision right now, but when I'm not mad. And sometimes you compromise or because you just need time to think and process, right? Okay, so those are the different conflict styles. I'm going to give you there's the other one. Lori, if you want to help with this and pass those out. I want you to take a few minutes to fill this out. And from what you found out so far and from the handout, try to figure out how do you feel and what do you think when you have conflict. Okay? While she's passing that out, I have to tell a funny story. When my kids were little, they were in the back seat of the car fighting, and they were just making so much noise. And they were the twins, and they were about 8. And I just got sick of it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped the car, and I put them in the ditch. And I said, you go out, now you just go at it. You just fight. And they looked at each other like this. I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why can't you fight? Just do it. You were just about killing each other in the back seat. And they're like, and they look, Mom, and there's this farmer and his wife in the yard right there, like crazy woman. And but this same exact thing. This was like, for me, this was like a learning moment, because about 5 years later, I had 2 nurses' aides go at it in the hallway. I mean, we're talking go at it. We started pulling hair, and there was some punching, and where's the nurse? Because of course the nurse gets called for everything, right? I mean, if the toilet falls off the wall, you're going to get called, right? And so I go over there, and I took them both, each by the arm, and of course, where did you go? The only safe place? The med room. And brought them in the med room, and I said, okay, now have at it. And they just looked at each other like this, because it had worked the last time when they're twins, so. It worked that time, and it worked this time too. They just both stood there looking at each other, and I said, well, come on, have at it. I mean, I don't know what to do with you. You're both grown women. You're fighting. You're like pulling hair. This is crazy. Well, she did it. And so then, long story short, we diffused the situation. At least the hair pulling stopped and the punching stopped, and I had to separate them. But it can get that bad. And so sometimes you're the person that's in the conflict, and sometimes you're the person trying to help diffuse or fix the conflict. So take a few minutes and think about the first I feel and I think. While you're working on that, I think a few of you are getting done with the top part at least. I have to tell you another story. There was a director of nursing once that was a very strong personality that I worked for. And there's two of you here that know who I'm talking about. She's long retired, so I think she was stressed out to the max. I don't know. But she was so scary, and she was the shark every moment of every day. Right? Am I wrong? No. Yeah, I'm not wrong. So she was like the shark every single moment of every single day. We were all afraid of her. I mean, clearly, it was like when she would walk down the hall, you would just scatter. I mean, it would be, and she ran a tight ship, I'll tell you that. And we had a social worker, a different one. This is a different facility that I worked at, a different home, and she was very passive aggressive, and that's herself saying that. And this DON would just mow her down. She would just mow her down, and it was just awful and pitiful to watch her do it, because the social worker would just be like, I mean, she was just like, it would just happen so frequently. And she was like one of my best friends. And I said to her, why do you do that? Why do you let her talk to you that way? Don't, stand up, put your chest out and your shoulders up, and I don't care, I'm Gumby, I don't know, but don't crouch. She goes, I can't help it. I said, why not? When she comes at me, I can see what she's going to do, and all I think is, red alert, oh my God, back up, retreat. Ah! And seriously, that's what she thought. She said, that's exactly how I feel. And so talk about workplace, happiness for her. She was scared, and that's what she said. That's how she felt. And so I put some of those on there, and I learned from her a lot. And I just said, I used to try to coach her. I'm not a shark all the time, but I can be when I need to be. Well, I'm a nurse, so, right? Anybody else ever have that feeling? Like they can be a shark when they need to be? Yeah? Okay, we have one person back there, one lowly person who's going to admit it. Appreciate that. She just couldn't. It wasn't in her personality. So just make sure that if you have staff like that, that you understand and that you aren't like that, because it doesn't make for a good workplace at all. All right. So you took the front part of the inventory. Do you guys have an idea of what kind? And now, I'm not saying that you're this all the time, but generally what you try to be or what you think you work as. Does this help you, give you an idea of what the descriptions of each and how you feel and think? Yeah? Anybody want to share who they think they are? Because you're very different, like sometimes at home than you are at work, or with these friends than you are with your mother. Anybody willing to share?
Mine's kind of different. So I do use the collaboration. However, I feel that after it's been collaborated,
Exhausted?
it needs to be dropped, and then the shark needs to come out, and this is how we're doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to beat a dead horse for 10 years.
That is, I think that's a nurse personality, because we can only fiddle fart around for so long, right? Right? I mean, we can only like, okay, we've discussed this and discussed this. Now it's time to make a decision because I got other stuff to do. Yeah, so I get that. I think that's very normal and okay. But you know, the great thing about it is that hopefully you'll have other leaders around you and other people that will say, okay, I understand a decision has to be made, but maybe your decision, if you're the decision maker, has been tweaked or skewed because of information you got during the collaboration. Yeah, it's good. Anybody else?
I think it depends upon each situation because you know, you can see yourself as what you think you are the most. But you can also see yourself as, or I can see myself as, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like you said, it's
Yep.
the things that, is this worth fighting about?
Right.
I do like to try to bring staff together and try to come across, together with a mutual understanding or decision of what's going to happen or what's going to change. But if it doesn't happen, sometimes you have to
Yeah.
put your sharp teeth in.
Sometimes you.
My husband often says at home, at least weekly, you're not the boss here.
I get the DONing me, you're donning me.
Oh, yeah.
Donning me. I'm like, what is donning you? You're director of nursing me. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm gonna bring my job description home, honey. I don't think you understand. Donning you. You want me to don you?
My husband says, you're not at work here, you're not at work here, and I'm like, then do what I ask you to do.
See, if they just did what we asked them to do, we would get to move on to the next thing, right? Oh my God, that's funny. That's funny. I think one of nurses' best qualities is that we can walk into a room easily and see what needs to be done. That's our best quality. The problem is that we can walk into our home and see what needs to be done. Because they don't march to our tune. Well, it's not like they march to our tune at work either all the time. But they can, and you have more influence there. At home, I think sometimes the mom has the least influence to get people to do what you want them to do. But yes, that's. I have a daughter who, out of all my three, she can walk into a room. She should be a nurse. She's not, but she was never going to be a nurse like mom. But she can walk into a room and see that too. And I tell her, don't do what I did. You'll be me. Watch out. Then she laughs and says, I can't help it. Well, you can't help it. It's okay. So
I really think that a lot of these, from my perspective, is what's the relationship with you and whoever you're having the conflict with,
Right.
and what role do you play? Because, when you talk about a husband, a spouse, are you a manager, and people that you work with, is it a department manager, is it, one of your staff that you supervise? I think that is key to how this all plays out.
Right.
And what position you take.
Right.
What do you have to lose?
right.
What's at stake?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why when I said there is a maybe a style that comes out more frequently in each one of us than another, but every single one of these are good in certain situations. And just for you guys to be here, to have this piece of paper, to look at it, to think about it, that might just be enough to help you to, to openly just say, okay, well, this is where I might need to be here, or this is where I might need to be there, right?
It just depends on you. I mean, it's just like nursing. You approach each resident in a different way because you know how they respond to different things.
Right.
It's the same with staff, coworkers, other department heads. Some of them, you just know you have to be very accommodating, and that's just how you feel the best with them. And some of them, I walk
Right.
in the door knowing full well I've got the shark suit on. So
Right.
I think it just depends on them just as much as it does you.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you might be surprised, somebody who you actually normally acts this way comes in and something bad has happened at home and they act a different way, and you're just like, whoa. Wow. So, yeah. So this is probably the 4 best things that I think, if you can remember today, this is the best thing. This is when somebody's like coming at you, or you're angry and upset. These are the 4 best things, and I would just put a star by them, because when I get upset and I get frustrated and angry and I need something taken care of, I need somebody to do something, or if somebody completely blindsides me and comes to me with then I have to do this. The number 1 thing is to manage your emotions quickly. When you're at work and somebody comes up to you, how many times have you gotten from this end of the hallway to the other end of the hallway and 12 people have asked you for something or come with a problem, right? And the hallway is like 10 feet long. It can happen. So the best thing for you to do, and what I try to do, is remember to control my initial reaction. And if you think about it, you can do it. Like when they say something to you and it's off the wall. Like, what? Like, or you see something, you see something happening and it's just not, you just can't believe you're just witnessing this right here. And you get upset initially. Calm down. Number 1 thing, control your initial reaction, so that keep your voice down. Don't you get your voice up here? Yes. My sister called me yesterday and she texted me, I need to vent, with that little emoticon that looks like a devil. I'm like, oh God, okay. Hi. She's like, and her voice was already elevated. It was like 3 octaves above her normal voice. And I'm like, okay, I'm teaching a class tomorrow on conflict, and she's seriously having some conflict. So how do I said, first of all, okay, let's bring her down a little bit. Let's just bring your voice lower. Don't go, what? Just, what? And so initially, your first reaction. Second thing, control your emotions throughout it. Especially when you're dealing with somebody else's bad behavior, like you're writing somebody up or somebody's done something wrong, it's easy to get angry because you can't think to yourself, oh, how could they do this? Why do they keep doing the same wrong thing over and over? And you get frustrated and it comes out in your voice. And if you're writing somebody up, that's a bad time for you to talk like that. You need to not talk like that. You need to say it in factual form, not emotion. The other thing is that when somebody comes at you, I'll tell you a quick story about a time, and I didn't know Deb was going to be here, but she knows what I'm talking about because she was in the room when it happened. I'm a very emotional person, but at work I always tried to be pretty professional and not cry. But I look back on this now, and it was one of the times I cried in front of my boss at work. And I was a staff development director, and we were on call every 10th weekend, me and the ADON. And what happened was all the nurse managers were on call every 5th weekend. And the point of me only having to be on call every 10th weekend was that I was coming in on the evenings and nights. That was my trade-off. And then the ADON was the ADON. And so she only had to do every 10th weekend. Well, unbeknownst to me, without talking to me, the director of nursing made a decision that I would now start working being on call every 5th weekend. I'm a single mom. And at that time, initially I was upset, and then I started crying. And I was so frustrated with myself. Do you remember that? And I started crying, not because I didn't get it. It had to be that way. We had gone down one nurse manager. I don't remember what it was. I don't even remember. It wasn't that important. But at the time, I started crying at work, and I was upset and I was sad. I was like thinking about being on call and what I was going to have to do, and do I have to still come in on nights? It was affecting my life personally. And that's where it really hit me. So when you talk to people and you write them up, or you just have a conversation, think about how this might affect their personal life or what's going on in their personal life. And see if you can look at it from their point of view and then help them. But one of the things, if you don't want to lose credibility with like somebody who's a peer, and you don't want to lose the argument, and don't start crying. Right there, you're like, or your voice goes up in octave, and right away they can see that you know in the back of your mind that you're not going to win because your voice is up here. You already can tell that you're frustrated and you must not be going to win the argument or the fight or the discussion. So control your emotions, listen for feelings, we talked about that already, listen for their feelings, pay attention to your own feelings, and then respect. Always respect for the other person's point of view, always respect for why they think what they are asking you. Generally, when it's staff subordinates that you're talking about, it's usually because there's something that's affecting them at home. And, you know, if it's attendance or something like that, that doesn't always mean it's warranted, but, you know, if it is, think about that. So respect. So conflict occurs, and then we either have conversation, confrontation, or combat. And that's the combat. Hopefully you don't have to get to that point. I mean, those two girls that I brought into the med room, they were definitely in combat. Hopefully you don't ever have to get to that point. But I remember calling the police one time when we had to let somebody go, me and the HR person, because the boyfriend said he was going to come in there and kick our butts. And we had to call the police when we let her go. And then when she came back in a couple days later to get her last check, her boyfriend came and we were like, 911 is right. So combat does happen. But why don't we just have the conversation? I think as directors of nursing, we probably get used to having a conversation, but it's uncomfortable. When you first start, like you're walking down the hall and you see the nurse's aide, and you still see it, even though it's bad, pulling a resident or a tenant backwards in the wheelchair, right? Not a big deal. That's not personal. You're easy to say to them, hey, you can't pull that person backwards. And they say, well, I can't push them forward because they can't lift their feet up on the pedals, right? That's what they say. Well, where are their foot pedals? I don't know, I could only find one. Well, we need to find one because if you pull them backwards, it's not good for their equilibrium, and you should try being pulled backwards. It's bad. But you have to have that conversation right there on the spot. That's a simple one to have. But what's the not simple ones to have is when it's personal about that person themselves. That was a work-related issue. You're not doing that. Please don't do that. It's easy to have. But the problem is when you see somebody doing something like on their phone. I haven't been working in the facilities for like about 6 months now in any place. Do you allow them to have their phones on them?
Mm-mm.
No.
We just had a huge leadership meeting over this.
Yeah.
And revamped our policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the point where I'm almost like, should we get a basket at the nurse's station?
Right.
Everybody has to put their phone in?
Yeah.
But then are we liable
Right.
for the phones?
Something happens and they get stolen and, yeah.
Well, I know I walked into a room and we haven't mandated it where they have to not have their phones, I mean, but we tell them they can't use them unless
Right.
it's, you know, in a non-resident area or, you know. But-
Right.
So I walked into I was looking for her because I live in AL, paging, and I'm trying to find her, and I walked in to this resident's room, she's sitting on her couch on her phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I was so angry at
Yeah.
that moment, I go get off the phone right now. And then I had to walk away because I was just like,
Yeah.
because I was just like, I could have strangled her, you know, and then I called HR and then I said, you know, we're gonna have to meet and stuff, and so we brought her in, you know, and just talked about that it was inappropriate, and she didn't have a pager or a walkie on her too, that's how we
Right.
communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was saying, well, everybody else carries their phone and uses it, and I go, we're talking about you.
Yeah, right. That's,
You know,
yeah.
and it's back on her, and then she quit anyway, but that phone issue is just,
We're
Yeah.
finding it being almost an addiction for
Yes,
staff to check
it is.
their Facebook
yeah.
status or page,
Yes.
or Snapchatting, or
Yeah.
texting a boyfriend or loved one, or even their kids, or, you know, it's...
Oh, well, you see more and more, like on Good Morning America or any shows like that, they're having more and more people are already writing books about the addiction of checking. They can't stop. It's just, they just can't stop. So there's a definite problem with that. But, yeah, so having the conversation is the key to not having to get to a worse place. And that is, have the conversation the first time you see a problem. The very first time you see it, and every time thereafter. So that if they continue to do it, you've already laid the groundwork for what you're going to tell them in a write-up, which is a confrontation. Even it's kind of negative, but it doesn't have to be that way. but have the conversation. Tell them right away, that's wrong. You need to get off your phone. It's easier to avoid. Sometimes you just don't have time. But if you do that and they see you avoid, they're going to think that's permission for them to do it. So sometimes it seems easier to go over, under, around, but we just need to go through. When you go over, it's kind of like hitting a pothole on the road. You just think, oh, well, you know, I'm sure the state highway department will fix it tomorrow. And you come back and you don't call the state highway, and maybe and you come back and the pothole is bigger. and your car just boom. And so you're just going over it. You're not, you know it's there, but you need to handle it and you don't. Going under it is like avoiding. It's just, I just don't see it. I don't know it. I'm oblivious. And then you really tell yourself maybe you didn't see that thing. Or 26 years later, your wife leaves you for, you know, who knows what. Or you go around it. Huh?
What became of her?
She married a wealthy man down in Florida, and
She have him waiting on the other side of the curb?
no, that was, no. She just knew she wasn't going to be there anymore.
Just thinking.
Yeah. And around and around and around. Sometimes we go around and around. They say if you go around and around, you lay in bed. The next time that happens, I'm gonna, and then you don't, and you're busy and you don't have the conversation like you should. But if they say if you have a conversation 3 times in your head, then it's time to have it with that person. Think about the rule of 3. 3 times in your head, if you've had that conversation, the 4th time is the time to have it with that person. A conversation. Not necessarily confrontation or anything like that, but a conversation. And eventually we just need to go through it. We just need to go through. It's painful, sometimes it's frustrating, but we have to go through it. So we've already talked about that. So how to have the conversation. And we talked about this. Deb said, or somebody, I think it might have been Deb, or maybe it was Lynn, that stick to the real issue. Like you said, don't talk about the friends or somebody else does it or your brother or sister. We're talking about you right now. We're talking about what you did. Well, it doesn't matter what happened, what the policy used to be, what the DON before me said. This is the thing. Stay to the facts and the facts only. State the problem and then listen. Now, when I was the DON, I used to have the nurse managers write up their write-up, or the staffing coordinator would write up for the attendance and just give it to the nurse manager for their person on their staff member on their unit. But I always had them put it underneath like your tablet or something, and then you just sit down and you talk. Because if they see the write-up there already, they can tell already that you haven't even given them an option to explain themselves. Maybe they did something wrong, but maybe they didn't. So have the write-up available if it is like you think it is, but don't show it to them until you've stated the problem and then you listen. Because I've had more than one time happen where I listened and I found out that what I thought was real wasn't real. And then I just said, then they never knew that I had a write-up underneath that piece of paper, that tablet, or that binder. They would just, I said, okay, well, I just called you in here to get the story. Because in my brain, I'm like, okay, I got to switch this because guess what? It's not like I thought it was. That other person is a little tattletale and they did something wrong too. So, but...
Or it's worse than you thought.
Yes.
So I had this guy in the office with a witness because I knew he was going to be mad. And we have this policy, 3 times you're late, it's an absence. So he was absent. Then I started looking at how many times he'd been late, and there were 6. So he says, that's not true. Your time clock's wrong. And I happened to have the office manager with me during this. And I said, bring up all his hours, bring up all of Tony's hours since he started. And it was me. So she brought them all up, and we started counting. Supposed to be there at 2:30. Up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, please don't let there be any more. That nobody wrote down. 7.
Oh boy.
8, 9, 10. Oh. He's like, that's not true. That's not true. I'm here an hour before work and I'm in the parking lot and I always am on time. So
you never know. Sometimes it's worse. Clearly. Yeah. So listen to their side and then agree on the problem. I fired a lot of people while I was a DON, not gonna lie. In the first couple years, we fired, the nurse managers and I fired a lot of people. There was a standard that needed to be met, and we weren't at it, and we got to the point where we were at it. But during that time, there was a lot of attendance issues, and there was a lot of productivity and work things, and we didn't fire them. They wrote their own story. That's how I like to think of it. They wrote their own story. I told them what the standard was now going to be, and they needed to decide. Some of them I think they just had to check it out, see if it was really going to happen. And then when it happened, like, it didn't take like one, it took like 5 before the rest of them were like, oh crap. They will fire you. But still and yet, we had to weed out the people that needed to go for productivity, for motivation, for attitude, for attendance, for many things. And so after that, I mean, we always kept track of issues. We had little scary files that we would write on, that we knew what was going on. And then when it came time to write up first, second, third, suspension, termination, nobody was ever surprised. So we would sit down and brainstorm. We would agree on the problem. You call in too much. You call more than the policy. And when you show them the piece of paper, they can't deny that. So agree on the problem. And that's a simple one because it's black and white, but then there's other things that you can figure out. With your teenagers, you're supposed to be home at midnight, and it was 1 a.m. Period. We agree on the problem? I don't think that's fair. Okay, well, it doesn't really matter if it's fair. That's the problem. Brainstorm solutions, and then you can brainstorm solutions. And sometimes it's really great because you figure out why they're calling in or why they're not doing their job or whatever, or you figure out why your kids are doing the things they're doing or even your spouse. And brainstorm solutions and negotiate a win-win. Okay, so that's what we need, what we do. So I'm going to ask you to do one last thing, and we're going to play a little game. Does everybody have a piece of paper? Okay. So I want you to write down, when you think of the word conflict, I want you to write down 4 words when you think of the word conflict that you think of with conflict. Okay. So I want to, let's just see, what are your 4 words over here?
Time, solutions, feelings, and opportunity.
Feelings and opportunity. That's awesome. So time would be a time waster or it just takes a lot of time.
Time consuming.
Time consuming. Solutions, that makes sense. Feelings, listening and learning.
We had a variety of different feelings, so we just combined them into one word.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Scared.
Frustrated.
Sure. Oh, perfect.
So we just combined it into feelings.
Perfect. Bad feelings. Scary feelings. And then opportunity. All right. How about you guys?
We have relationship, stress, solution, and defensive.
Solution and defensive. Okay. So stress and defensive go in with the feelings of your guys's. So we're there. And then solutions is the same. And relationships is, so we have time. I'm going to put these down to 4. So we have time, opportunity, feelings, and relationships. Time. So it's exhausting. It takes a lot of time. It's exhausting. And you guys initially had exhausting. Lots of feelings. And not always good feelings, right? Opportunity. That's a really positive spin on it, is the opportunity to make a change. And then also, it's about relationships with the people and the different relationships. Awesome. So I'm just going to ask you, is there any, was there any conflict in figuring it out?
No, we got along really well. Very well.
Yeah. Good.
You were worried I was going to sing.
Oh, you should sing. And none over here? Any, so you have a greater vision of what everybody, or do you think you guys are real similar because you guys all do the same job?
I think we're
Yeah. All right. Well, always remember that 10% of conflict is due to difference of opinion, but 90% is due to wrong tone of voice. So make sure that you manage your emotions and things might go easier. Thank you very much. You've been great. Great participation.